I'm going to talk about creating design systems with functional CSS. We're going to see first what is functional CSS. Then we're going to see what are its benefits, and then we're going to see how to start working with functional CSS. Okay, so to explain what is functional CSS, I'm going to do a parallel with functional programming. In functional programming, the core concept is to create systems using a base of small solid blocks called functions. By a small, it means that they do one simple task. And by solid, it means that they do that task very well. The function will always return the same output, and it has no side effects. If you have a function that no matter what arguments you pass to the function, if you pass the same argument, it will return always the same results. You might think that this is like obvious or normal, but it's not. Usually, we create functions, but those functions are prompt to having side effects. What do I mean by this? If a function connects to a database, for example, that connection may not work. So for the same argument, if in the case that the connection was not successful, the output will not be the same because it just couldn't connect to the database. So those are called in functional programming are called impure functions because they are prompt to having side effects or to just output something different or unexpected. So in the case of functional CSS, as CSS is not essentially a programming language, you will not be able to connect to any database or another source. So you practically have zero chance to create an impure function. You just add the desired stylings, and it will always output this stylings. But I just wanted to give you a clear concept of what is a function in functional programming, a pure function. So in this case, we see that this class called center block, it has 3 CSS declarations, and it just essentially centers a block, centers anything inside the block to the center. Another concept of functional programming is that it's declarative. What do I mean by declarative? Is that what you write is what you get. When we start programming, we usually start by programming in an imperative way. This means that you write on how to do something. You write for loops. You're writing the ways that you want to create something. But in declarative programming, you already have behind the scenes the function does that's all the loops and functions that you need behind. So for example, in this case, just by adding center block, we are saying that the block will be center. For another class would be empty1, that means margin top 1. It means it's going to add a margin to the top of 1 EM, for example. Text justify, it means that it's going to justify the text, etc. So declarative is that you have functions which names do what you want to do without doing without writing on how to achieve that purpose. Another core concept in functional programming is composition. Composition is to use your base small functions and create bigger functions, or just to group those functions and you create something bigger using those functions. So in the case of functional CSS, you can group those small functions in the class of an HTML tag. So you may be familiar if you have used the utility classes from Bootstrap. Bootstrap has has some utility classes that you can use, and it's basically this. You can group these CSS classes to achieve something bigger, or just to group those functionalities into one. We can also create bigger functions by composing other functions. It's quite similar, but of what I said in the previous slide, but with the difference that you save them inside another function. So for example, if you have a button as a class called button, and you want some specific CSS classes to be there, you just group them with this directive called apply. This directive is specific from a framework from which I'm going to talk later on the presentation. So we can see here that we have grouped 4 classes or 4 CSS functions into a bigger function called btn, or button. So essentially, we could just group this like this. And for those of you that have used the Lean theme, you can maybe be familiarized with this, because it's like creating the atoms in the CSS atoms in the atomic approach, where you have atoms, molecules, and organisms. In this case, these functions can be atoms. So do you have any questions or of what is functional CSS? Okay. Okay. What are its benefits? the most important one is performance, because the final CSS file will be smaller, a lot way smaller. So for example, we can see here a chart with the weight of the CSS files from some famous websites. And you see that some of those are pretty big. And in model connections, it could be something important to tackle. And we have down here at the bottom one called Tations. Tations is a functional CSS framework from which we're going to see a bit later. And you can see that this framework is just 15 kilobytes. So this is the most important benefit of using functional CSS. Another benefit of functional CSS is that the classes that you create or have from the framework that you use, the functional framework that you use, is that the classes are reusable. Because as we see in the traditional approach, we simply create classes to group styles. And here at Nolte, we usually just copy paste from Vision. And you just create, for any component, you just create a class and paste those styles there. And you know that many of those CSS declarations are being repeated. And with the functional approach, you only create classes to reuse them throughout all the project, or even they can be reused between projects. Another benefit is that there is a productivity boost in the development, because the developer will not be constantly switching context between the markup and the style sheet. So this may sound like not too much trouble switching context, but if you just have one context, it will be a lot easier. Another benefit of functional CSS is that it's easier to maintain. It's highly likely that when you introduce a new component to a project, you will not need to write any new CSS. So you would not even need to create a new CSS file for each component. If a new developer comes to a project, or it's just maintaining the project, he will need just to read the HTML, and he can see which styles are applied to that HTML instantly. And also some small tweaks like adding margins is just a matter of adding the margin class to the HTML. So hard to start. There are already created some functional CSS frameworks. The most popular ones are Tailwind CSS, Tations, Bash CSS, Express CSS, and Bootstrap partially. These frameworks are low-level CSS. This means that they just contain the building blocks of a design. So they don't have any pre-made design already. No pre-made components like Bootstrap. So you will not need to overwrite anything. And they are also highly customizable to the project's design specifications. So you could customize the primary font, the primary colors, the initial font size, margins, etc. From reviewing the frameworks, I saw that the most popular one was, and that it had more features, is Tailwind CSS. This framework has all the CSS function blocks that you will ever need in a project. So you will not need to create anything. You just can use them in the HTML directly. This framework is highly configurable to your project design specifications. This framework also allows you to create plugins to share your compositions, like the button example that I showed you before. The drawback of this framework is that it's quite big. It's 350 kilobytes. But if you use some techniques of compression, like Broadly, which is a compression algorithm from Google, the size can be reduced to 70 kilobytes. Tashions is another framework which follows in popularity. And it also has a lot of CSS functions, but it's not as complete as Tailwind. But the major advantage of Tashions is that it's very lightweight. It only weighs 15 kilobytes. So I'm going to show you a bit about Tailwind CSS. So for example, we have here an example of a card. Everything here in this style is made with these utility classes, as you can see here in the HTML. We have rounded borders for the image. We have flex, display flex. We have margins, uppercase for the text. We have font stylings, hover underlines, and also we have responsive features that are prefixed with the breakpoint. So this entire style was made with no style sheet. No custom style sheet. It just uses the Tailwind style sheet. Here we have the directive that I told you before, apply, where we can create, we can compose functions, CSS function or classes, with other smaller functions. And this is how you configure the Tailwind. It uses JavaScript to make the configurations. So, for example, we have here the site also shares some components of what can be done by just using this framework. We have alert boxes, badges. We have buttons. We have cards. Forms. And it even has a grid system. So you can use this and not use any extra grid system like Bootstrap or anything like that. So you can just use this framework, and it will give you the utility classes and a grid system. We have here some navigation examples. The conclusions. This is a very different approach from how we add the styles to a project. It will be a bit hard at the beginning to write everything directly in the HTML, but once you work with it, you will never go back. This approach is meant to be used along component-based UI templating. For example, in the Lean team, we will be creating the UI components so that you don't have to write too much these CSS functions throughout all the project. You just reuse the components. And as I told before, as they come with a grid system, you will not need any other CSS framework. Thank you. Do you have any questions? Or do you would like to see more examples? Or anything? Yes, Bootstrap is partially a functional CSS framework, as it contains utility classes that can be reused. If you go to this documentation, they already have functional CSS here. This is something that many developers don't know that it exists. They don't just use Bootstrap for the grid system and for the components. But Bootstrap already has functional CSS, but it's not, it doesn't have all the utility classes that you need. Instead of, for example, Tailwind that has all. For example, you have here everything you need for font family, font size, everything you need for font. They already exist. Text alignment, backgrounds, borders, flexbox, spacing, sizing, tables, SVGs. So you practically won't need to write any CSS. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. For example, we have here um, just by appending uh, like the modifier that you said, you completely have a different styling just by adding the modifier. So it's practically very easy to change, modify something. That's a very good question, but that can be better answered from someone that has had that experience. But I can tell you that to add this new styling, you can upgrade the older projects gradually just by creating new components using this approach. And when you get to the moment that all your components are new and that all the old code is not being used in the front end, you can start erasing the other code. But it can be it's done gradually. So first you will be adding more CSS, but later on when you have a solid component base in your legacy project, you can start removing some of the old CSS. Okay. Can you repeat the question, please? Uh, okay, your question about that this framework uses JavaScript. It uses JavaScript, but when compiling, but it will output CSS finally. So, no, to compile your configurations. Okay. Yes, tabling is very complete. So I encourage you to take a look to this framework and to use it in your newest projects, and you will see that for developers it will be a great way to add the stallion.